Part 2 of reading Chapter 1, Setting the Scene, from Ghost Stations 2 by Bruce Barrymore Halfpenny. My laptop chopped us off just as I was saying that ghosts are merely, that there is no death and they're merely living in another dimension, in another form. And we got blipped off, which is very annoying and inconvenient. So the Mama T, aka the Tanya, is back to continue with my reading of this chapter. So here we go. In America, one man from the Survival Research Foundation has been trying to make contact with the dead, which is where we got chopped off when I said there is no actual death. I mean, yes, there's death of the physical body, but our soul moves on into another form. But even with all the science in the world, he has not been able to do so. He needs the science of the other world. Another world? In August 1987, Sir David Bates, Emeritus Professor of Theoretical Physics at Queen's University, Belfast, said that extraterrestrial civilizations are much too busy to try to contact planet Earth. He refused to put his name to a letter in the Science Journal, which had been signed by 70 leading scientists. If there is life in outer space, what about the dark side of space and the black holes? Is this the time zone that people with special psychic powers can enter? It is more than just an interesting thought. It has to be the answer and would explain many of the stories in this book. A time zone would explain the Bermuda Triangle, not as silly as it seems. Let us look at radio waves and television waves. These are beamed through space, and, in the case of the latter, a picture appears on a screen in a room hundreds or even thousands of miles away from where it was transmitted. What if there is a time zone and these airwaves are transmitted back in time? People with psychic powers are then able to break into these airwaves and enter the time zone. It is very interesting to note that many of the people who saw the ghostly pilot at RAF Leeming said that sometimes the ghost was surrounded by a greenish light. Other times it is indistinct, almost like a bad television reception. Over a dozen people who have seen the ghost described it misty, like a bad television picture, just like television waves, but coming from another time zone. And if the people did not have full psychic powers, then it would be like getting poor reception. One who thinks that this is possible is Lord Balfour. During an interview he said, "Everyone cannot be wrong who claims to have seen some ghost, and I feel quite sure that it is the case that there are various persons who meet with some terrific situation or shock to leave in the ether a memory of what they have been through, and this is interpreted rather like we interpret the waves of wireless and television. If a suitable receiving mind comes in contact with the impression left by the individual in the case, there is the ghost." And Lord Balfour added, "Who would have thought the ether held waves interpreted by television now, today, in hundreds of different ways?" Many people claim to have had a vision that could be the same as entering the time zone. Take the case of Mrs. Betty Dowmond, a medium, who recalls a vision she saw in 1974. I was sitting with a group of friends when I saw in the room a row of cottages at the side of an airfield in Germany, she said. I felt this place was on German soil. I heard the noise of an aeroplane, and as it grew louder, I saw a huge plane rise up from behind the cottages and dip suddenly to crash in flames onto the airstrip. I was shaken by what I had seen. I explained this to Mary Toganari, my hostess, who looked at me with surprise and pleasure. She then told me that her younger brother Peter, in the French Air Force, had died on a German airfield during the war. He was a pilot of a French Populatore fighter who died in 1941. Betty told me this story, and I have no reason to disbelieve her, to prove, as she put it, that life continues unseen after death. Peter was in that room, she said, and he gave me this vision, knowing I'd tell his sister what I'd seen. So, how do the psychic Ghostbusters answer that? She saw her vision and entered the time zone, going back in time to the year 1941. It was all so clear to her and true in what she saw. Not convinced? Well, let us look at another, more famous example. Marie Bernadette Soubirous, or should I say Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. She was born 7th of January 1844 at Lourdes, France, and between 11th of February and 16th of July 1858, at the age of 14, she had a series of visions of the Virgin Mary, who revealed her identity with the words, "I am the Immaculate Conception." Bernadette rigorously defended that the visions were genuine, despite doubt cast by her parents, the local clergy, and civil authorities. Sorry, I seem to be smushing my lipstick a lot today, I don't know why. Throughout she claimed they were true. Bernadette suffered from poor health, and she contracted cholera in the epidemic of 1854. She suffered from asthma and many other ailments throughout her life. I just sigh at that because I know how that goes, baby girls and baby boys. At the age of 20, she became a nun at Nevers, where she spent her remaining years in prayer and seclusion, happy and full of wit despite almost constant sickness and pain. She died in agony on 16th of April 1879 at Nevers, having willingly accepted her great sufferings in faithful fulfillment of her lady's request for penance. With all the traditional solemnity, the Blessed Bernadette Soubirous, the shepherdess and visionary of Lourdes, was canonized by Pope Pius XVI in 1933. I just saw when it blipped off and I had to come back on to make this video, Pope Francis has died. Rest in peace, Pope Francis. He died of double pneumonia, if I read that correctly. The chapel of Saint Gilda or Gilda convent in Nevers contains her body. Her feast day is 18th of February in France, but elsewhere it is celebrated on 16th April. Is that proof enough? Did Bernadette break into the time zone? Had she the psychic powers to do so? She certainly had the visions. But what about the many people who feel a presence? It is possible they are people who come to the edge of the time zone but do not have the psychic powers to enter. This was the case of the Bowyer family who experienced a presence. On Friday, 21st of August 1987, Mr. and Mrs. Bowyer, with their son and daughter, went to Bucknell in Lincolnshire for a day's visit to see a friend. They had driven down from Ganges over Sands and had arrived early morning at their friend's house in Bucknell. After lunch, they set off for home, but decided to stop for a picnic tea at the old airfield at Bardney, and will never forget their visit, as Mrs. Bowyer explains. We had a short walk towards the watchtower and perimeter track, and both my husband and myself kept looking over our shoulders. They both said they had the feeling of being watched, and Mrs. Bowyer added, "There is no doubt in our minds that we were in company. We both felt a presence, but it must be said that the presence was most pleasant." So we ask ourselves, who are these people with special psychic powers? It is impossible to say. It can be anyone, like little Bernadette, as we have just seen. But remember, the world of the supernatural can be a strange and often frightening one for those who try to unlock the time zone and enter. It can be mind-blowing and add only to the mysteries of the dark unknown. For Karl Ernst Kraft, entering into the dark unknown signed his death warrant, and he died a horrid death in Buchenwald concentration camp. Rest in peace. Kraft was born in Switzerland in the year 1900, and at a very early age he became interested in the supernatural. At the age of 36, he moved to Germany, where he set himself up as a clairvoyant. Kraft arrived just as there was a great build-up in feeling against the Jews, and he quickly seized the moment and started to issue anti-Jewish leaflets based on his powers as a clairvoyant and astrologer. Or maybe I won't wish you to rest in peace. Fry in hell, you miserable bloodless dog. But anyway. This quickly came to, I'm laughing because just as I said that, there was a cold breeze from my air conditioner which suddenly just suddenly manifested blowing around my ankles. No accidents in the universe, people Earth. But anyway. This quickly came to Adolf Hitler's notice, and within a few months Kraft was a member of Hitler's special group. He quickly moved up the ladder of power after he successfully predicted the abdication of King Carol II of Romania months before it happened. King Carol of Romania was forced to abdicate 6th of September 1940 after Romania was divested of territory by the Axis powers. That prediction was proof enough for Hitler, who said he has supernatural power. With such an interest in Kraft, the British intelligence became involved. Had this man special supernatural powers? Hitler thought so, and at that stage he was winning the war. By now Kraft was part of Hitler's propaganda machine, and it is true to say, that he did influence Hitler in the early days. And it was Kraft's prophecy that sent Rudolf Hess to Scotland. But did that fruitless mission lead to Kraft's downfall? The answer has to be yes. Had Karl Kraft the powers to unlock the supernatural? That we will never know. He did have many strange occult techniques, but they did not save him from Hitler's SS. One who claims to have psychic powers, and I have no reason to disbelieve her, is Christine Grant from Bristol, who was recently in the news after she claimed that Brian Jones of Rolling Stone fame, who was found dead in mysterious circumstances in 1969, returns to help her with her work as a clairvoyant. Another with psychic powers is Julia Wolfe Harlow. You can read what she has to say in Psychic Powers. She has the special psychic powers to unlock the time zone. All mediums claim to have a spirit guide, many claiming to be the spirit of a Red Indian. The language is a little bit out of date. That should read as Native American people of Earth. But anyway. Medium Sid Finn contacts a Red Indian spirit, as does medium John Turner. Why a Red Indian spirit, you might ask? That could well be. And we only have to look at the ghost dance to give us the answer. Again, it stems back to religion. Ghost dance is the name of two distinct cults and arose from the northern Paiute prophet dreamers in western Nevada, who introduced the imminent return of the dead, hence ghost dance. The ousting of the white man and his magic, and a return to their way of life. It was believed the ghost dance would bring about the changes, and during the dances, the prophets had songs revealed to them from the spirit world. In their vision, they would enter the spirit world. Was this the time zone? The first ghost dance was born in 1869 around the dreamer Wodzi Wob, who died in the early 1870s. It then spread to California and Oregon tribes, but it faded out. The second ghost dance arose from Wovoka, whose father, Tavibo, had assisted Wodzi Wob. But Wovoka had been influenced by Mormons, Presbyterians, and the Indian Shaker Church. The second ghost dance soon spread, and it was given a boost after Wovoka had a vision. During a solar eclipse in January 1889, Wovoka had a vision that he had died and spoke with God in heaven. He said he had been commissioned to teach the new dance and millennial message, and his self-inflicted stigmata on his hands and feet convinced the masses that he was Jesus Christ come to the Indians. Because of this, Indians travelled from far and wide to see Wovoka, and the ghost dance spread as far as the Canadian border, the Sierra Nevadas, and Texas. It reached the Sioux Indians at the time of the Sioux Uprising in the late 1890s, and it was wrongly blamed for the massacre at Wounded Knee in South Dakota. Over the years, the second ghost dance has become obsolete. Or has it? Are the Red Indian spirits that visit John Turner and other mediums those from the ghost dance? It makes one wonder. We do know that the ghost dance helped to reshape traditional shamanism, a belief system based on the healing and psychic transformation powers of the shaman or medicine man, and is still active with some tribes today. Native Americans do not like being referred to as shamans. It is a Siberian name for basically the same thing, but it's cultural misappropriation. They are medicine people or medicine men. So it is possible that Red Indian spirits, Native American spirits, are the researchers of the spirit world for many mediums today. And could it be the ghost dance that told the Squaws again a horrific racial slur that he's unaware of, dear goddess? To fill in Jacob Waltz's gold mine in the story, The Lost Dutchman's Gold Mine. Well, people back in the 80s lacked a lot of knowledge still about Native American culture and language and traditions. So we'll forgive him, but it's grinding my gears, people of Earth. Is it all in the mind, or are there ghosts and ghouls and things that go bump in the night? You might have put it all down to coincidence or superstition. We have proof of people with visions. Have they unlocked the time zone, or is it still a mystery to you? All a mystery, you might say, and you are back again to religion, mystery cults and the like. The term has been applied to God's thoughts and acts, the hidden meaning of the scripture, the Christian sacraments, certain pagan rites. The dictionary says, a religious truth revealed by God that man cannot know by reason alone, and that once it has been revealed cannot be completely understood. I trust it is now all clear. There are many unsolved mysteries, many from the Second World War. One of the most baffling was the mysterious disappearance of the French submarine, the Surcouf, which vanished in February 1942. The Surcouf was then the world's largest submarine. How did it die? It was obvious the Allies sank her, probably the Americans, and she went down with 129 crew on board. A mystery, an unsolved mystery, a chilling, unsolved mystery. Another puzzling mystery is the large symmetrical circles that have suddenly appeared in crop fields in the south of England. A large circle with 4 smaller adjoining ones has been seen in an escarpment called the Punch Bowl just outside Winchester, Hampshire. Other circles have been recorded in cornfields in Dorset and Sussex. After an absence of 2 years, circles, including one with a 25-yard diameter surrounded by 4 others, reappeared in August 1987 near the Westbury White Horse in Wiltshire. Mr. Pat Delgado, a design engineer, has studied the circles, but he cannot explain how the cereal crops are crushed taut in a perfect circle without any damage to the stems. It is a mystery. Does it still remain a mystery? If so, let us look at mystery religions. Mystery religions are secret cults of the Greco-Roman world that offered religious experiences not provided by the official public religions. This was the gateway for many into the supernatural, the spirit world, the unknown. These cults reached their peak in the first 3 centuries of the Christian era, and many had initiation rites, which included dances, in which death and resurrection were symbolically represented. Over the years, Oriental ideas were absorbed, and so enters the gruesome ghoul. From mystery to the world of superstition, an irrational belief, half-belief, or practice, and superstitions may be classified as personal, as with the story, call it superstition, cultural, or religions. Each time, back again to religion, for every religious system tends to accumulate superstitions. One man's religion is another man's superstition. Constantine called paganism superstition. Tacitus called Christianity a pernicious superstition. Protestants look upon Catholic veneration of relics and images as superstition. And to add to all that, all religious beliefs may seem superstitious to the disbeliever without any religion. Cultural superstitions are vast and too numerous to mention, and it is a fact that most will again stem back to religion. So we are back again to religion, which in turn brings us back to the supernatural. The Church of England is now a church of sinners, screamed the newspaper headlines after the depressing Crockford's preface and the subsequent suicide of Dr. Bennett and the unthinkable queer section in the church. Dr. Bennett was so fed up with the way of the church that he was considering becoming a Roman Catholic. The church is in decline, and yet the church itself does not realise it. Rotten Runcie, said Fiona MacDonald Hull in the Sun newspaper on Friday, 29th of April 1988. She went on to say that Archbishop Robert Runcie was a wimp. Sadly, the Church of England has only itself to blame. I don't know what they're referencing there, but I'm reading between the lines. I'm guessing it will probably have something to do with child sexual abuse. Possibly. I don't know the backdrop to that story. But knowing what I know about organised religions and their predilections right across the board, the spectrum, including my own religion, what they're capable of. Right. Religion I no longer observe, by the way. Oddly. Except for Hanukkah. I still observed Hanukkah. Although it was odd when I observed Hanukkah this year, I had a poltergeist messing with my candles. It was incredibly rude and a bit astonishing, by the way. Christian religion has played its part in English history over the centuries. Now it is a step back into the dark days of myths and the supernatural. Is the church fighting back? In December 1987, a Church of England exorcist, the Reverend Tom Willis, ended ghostly happenings aboard the fishing vessel Pickering after the crew refused to go to sea in the ghost ship. They complained that the ship had a will of its own. Lights would go on and off for no apparent reason. Heated cabins suddenly turned ice cold, and for no reason the engine kept breaking down. So in stepped exorcist, the Reverend Tom Willis. So will the psychic Ghostbusters make things better? Science might prove what people do not want to know. In the December issue of the Physics Bulletin, Dr. Richard Stevenson of Durham University shows how science has helped historians to pinpoint the date of Christ's birth. And the astronomical evidence suggests that Christ was born in the first half of the year 5 BC. Food for thought, for according to Luke, Christ was born during the reign of Augustus. This would therefore put the birth somewhere between 44 BC and AD 14. So, St. Matthew's Gospel gives evidence that Herod the Great died just after the birth of Christ. So knowing when Herod died would give good indication when Christ was born. Historians do know that just before Herod's death there was an eclipse of the moon. This was recorded by Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, for he recorded it just before Passover. Taking this a step further, the only lunar eclipses that could be seen from Israel at the time of the year took place on 23rd of March, 5 BC, and 13th of March, 4 BC. Armed with this information, astronomers then ran computer simulations of the night sky around that period of time to see if the Star of Bethlehem, mentioned in St. Matthew's Gospel, could be identified. This ties in with what Chinese astronomers recorded. The appearance of either an exploding star or comet in the spring of 5 BC, and this ties in with the eclipse information. So the two Gospels, St. Matthew and St. Luke, which recorded the birth of Christ, are not in keeping with the computer with the star. Or was there some astronomical phenomenon at that time? Long pause, question mark, long pause. It does say that the wise men had seen the star in the east and had followed it. But a star would not move in that way. But a comet does. It moves gradually across the sky as it orbits the sun, and would encourage the wise men to follow it. But there is no record of any comet at that period. Halley's Comet was seen by Chinese astronomers in 12 BC, around the right time of the year, but thought to be too early. So there we have it. Ghosts, ghouls. Don't you dare knock me off again, you rotten computer. Ghosts, ghouls, mystery, superstition, and the time zone theory. It could be the answer. Physicists have now said there could be a fifth force, so why not a time zone? I will let you, the reader, or you, the listeners, watchers, decide. You are now able to read the stories and understand. Or can you? Has the light flickered? Are you now looking over your shoulder? Is that the rain tapping on the window pane? Thunder as we speak. Is that scent you can smell? Not sure? And as for superstition, it would be very difficult to find anyone who would not, if pressed, admit to having one or two irrational beliefs or superstitions. Derek Jameson, on his radio program on Monday the 22nd of February 1988, interviewed the Grimsby Ghostbusters, and he said, "I love talking about the paranormal," and he added, "There could be another dimension." I think we've counted up to 15 dimensions, physicists I mean. 15 dimensions, people there. Wrap your mind around that. All bumping into each other, sometimes interfacing, but not with my lacing, you understand. Saving that for the one who's genuine and loving and kind. She sighs because I know it's probably never going to happen. Made up my mind. Not going to be played for a fool by any man ever, ever again. It's going to be a long, long, lonely life, people of Earth. But it's better than being played for a fool, or used, or worse, abused. Derek Jameson certainly does have an interest in ghosts, ghouls, mystery, and those from the other side. For on Thursday, 31st of March 1988, he reviewed Marcus from the Raelian movement. The movement started in France, a natural choice with so many believers, after a French journalist called Rael was contacted by an extraterrestrial on the 13th of December 1973. Over the next few years, Rael was contacted many times. His claims are impressive, you could say, out of this world. Out of this came the Raelian movement, and their organisation are now preparing the masses for when the extraterrestrials come down. They will land within the next 40 years, said Marcus. And he added, they look like us, but are smaller. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, Elohim in ancient Hebrew means those who came from the sky. Jameson said, so the whole biblical story could be a message from the beings beyond. So we are back to religion. But before you read on, get a whiff of psycho perfume and a bottle of Sandeman port to fortify you. Then read on. Get your teeth into a tempting and haunting legend of Ahag. The scene is now set. All right, we're 40 minutes in, but let's see how long chapter 2 is. It's not that long. I will continue and read chapter 2 since this got chopped up. This belongs to the first video, you understand. Chapter 2, Psychic Powers. A time zone and psychic powers able to unlock and enter that time zone is what I have talked about in chapter 1, setting the scene. Many people claim to have psychic powers such as clairvoyance and faith healers. With many people, it is uncanny. Take with Julia Wolf Harlow, who I contacted and asked her to relate her supernatural experiences. I have had many supernatural experiences, including those with animals and birds I have known in this life. The most memorable was the one that I had in Caton, near Lancaster, during the 1950s. Our neighbour had unearthed a very large oblong stone in his garden one day. It looked to me like an ancient gravestone. One Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting in the garden when I suddenly looked towards the neighbouring garden. What I saw was almost impossible to believe, but a beautifully dressed figure stood with one foot resting upon the great stone and with his right hand beneath his chin. He had obviously been a Scottish soldier because he wore a Royal Stuart tartan kilt with a wide red leather belt running from shoulder to waist, and this boasted an enormous golden buckle. He had a gorgeous white ruffle at his throat, and I noticed a dirk at the side of his kilt. What a handsome gentleman! His hair was red gold and curly, and his face must have broken a few hearts. I still believe that I saw the spirit of Bonnie Prince Charlie, or he could have been the young man who resembled him so closely that few people could tell them apart. I will just add that on the following Wednesday I happened to look towards the same spot, and I saw this attractive figure again, only this time he turned around to look at me too, and I received a lovely and unforgettable smile. Sometime later, I read in a library book that a tremendous battle had been fought between the Scots and the English, between Preston, Lancs and Ingleton. I had not known anything about this when seeing the memorable vision. It may be worth mentioning that before my experience with the supernatural, I once died when having treatment at a Blackpool hospital. Without going to details of this ordeal, I will just say that within a few seconds I was rising upwards. Something that looked like a curtain of silver bubbles came into view. When I parted this with my hand, I saw several historical personalities standing there, as though they were talking to each other. One of these gentlemen turned around to see who was approaching them. He wore aristocratic clothing of the Napoleonic era in France, and he held a lorgnette that was surrounded with flashing jewels. I did not need to be told that he was the Marquis de Sade. Then I noticed an effeminate individual who stood there with a very bored expression on his face. He was also dressed in old-fashioned attire and held a feather pen in one of his delicate white hands. Someone tried to attract his attention and called him Amadeus, and that was enough to reveal his identity. One of the individuals was instantly recognizable, Matthew Hopkins. He was watching me very thoughtfully. Before I was forcibly dragged back to life, I noticed a few more beings standing a little way behind the immediate characters. One of these was the very powerful Aleister Crowley. Some distance away from the rest, I saw a very handsome gentleman, none other than Napoleon Bonaparte. It seemed that within a very few seconds I was being pummeled back to this world. I regained consciousness to find a group of nurses around me. A nurse asked me what had happened because I'd had a marvellous smile on my face all the time, even though I was dead. I told her that I had felt happy for the first time in my life and did not appreciate being brought back to so much suffering and awful anxiety. On leaving the surgery, I found that everyone had gone, but although it had taken them quite a long time to bring me back to consciousness, I have never suffered the misfortune of a damaged brain. Fortunate. Many years went by after this incident, during which time I received a private operation that cured me of a very long illness. I also married a Prussian gentleman, much against the wishes of my foster parents. I will just add that we have always been very happy throughout the past 20 years. During the early part of my existence, I lived for an intolerable number of years in the same house in Essex. Since my marriage, we have moved from one address to another, always seeking change. It was when we lived in Northolt that my constant companion made his presence known to me. Remembering his intense study concerning myself when I briefly visited his own world, I was not surprised to find that my companion was Matthew Hopkins. I have since discovered that Matthew was not on the side of religion, but gave his allegiance to the opposition very capably too. I have no idea who this personage is. I'll have to look him up later. Although I've had visits from several of the personalities I saw during that afternoon at hospital, it seems that when one has chosen one's constant companion, he alone has the right to be there all the time. I have always been very psychic, and I have seen Matthew many times during John's absence, particularly when he has a message for me. My husband does everything for me due to a disablement caused by medical malpractice. Despite this, we are wonderfully happy together. Isn't she lucky to have a wonderful, loving husband? Julia talks of her constant companion. Other people refer to them as their guides. The guides are spirits of people who have been on the other side. or shall we say in the time zone, for many years, and have reached the highest astral plane. That is why many people, like the medium John Turner, have read Indian spirit guides. They have reached the highest astral plane. Julia continued. During the late 1960s, John and I lived in Ursula Road, Southall. It was literally on the border because our side of the road was Southall and the other side was Greenford. The house in which we had the top floor was inhabited by a malevolent presence. The first indication of this was when we heard a noise in the bathroom. We opened the door at 3 a.m. to find the bath tap full on and the bath rapidly filling with water. There was a weird glow on the wall above the bath, and when I washed my hands, I saw a creeping shadow moving up the wall in front of me. Some time later, I became ill and had to stay in bed. John switched on the electric fire. By that they mean heater. He left the room for a while, and when he returned, he asked me why I had switched off the fire. I told him that I felt much too ill to get out of bed, so he turned it on again. This happened again, so he stayed in the room after that. A small vase stood upon the mantelpiece that was decorated with a blue and a pink flower. The blue one was on view, so, preferring pink, I turned it around to show my own favourite colour. When we looked at the vase again, the blue flower was in view, although I changed it several times. The blue flower won eventually. Finally, we decided to leave, but one more thing happened before we left. The front room door was always locked, although I sometimes went in there to look for my husband when he was returning home from work. One afternoon during a weekend, I said that it would be nice to sit in the front room because it was more comfortable in there. When we opened the door, we found a room full of magazines that were all over the place. There were about 50 of them, all concerning cars and motorcycles, in which we had never been interested. They did not belong to the owners of the house, an elderly lady and her daughter, so again we blamed the malevolent presence. We were very glad to get out of there, because the atmosphere had been very much less than pleasant. During the 1950s and 60s, I was in show business as a singer, and I often helped Michael Holiday due to his fear of strangers asking him for autographs and photographs. One day I arrived at the theatre where he was appearing in Blackpool and found that he had not yet arrived. I stood waiting for him in the street outside the stage door. Up the stairs came Dickie Valentine. For some unknown reason, he picked on me and said that he wasn't going to give me his autograph. I said that I'd gone there to meet someone else, and this seemed to make him very angry indeed. Going backwards down the stairs, he suddenly missed his footing and fell. This made several onlookers laugh. He glared at me and called me a disgusting name, which I didn't understand. Not too long after that, he was burned to death in a road accident in which someone tried to unfasten his seatbelt. When people deliberately offend me, they bring a diabolical curse down on their own heads. Some people are like that, people of Earth. In addition to spirits, I have seen many wraiths. One of these appeared one midnight when I accompanied my husband and our nephew Paul to the ancient Perivale Cemetery. We stood just inside the entrance gate. The place was exceptionally quiet. John turned around to look in the opposite direction, and then it appeared. I saw a wraith-like figure, clad in what seemed to be a silver-grey cloak, glide swiftly behind a large tree to the right, and I noticed that Paul was looking in that direction too. On the way home, I asked him if he had seen anything. He said that he had, but that I would think him foolish if he described what it had been. I told him what I had seen, and he admitted that he'd seen the same figure. When I lived in Cleveleys near Blackpool, my foster father had double glazed windows fitted to prevent burglaries. Sleeping downstairs following an operation in Blackpool Hospital, I was awakened one night by a burglar trying to open one of the windows, and this made my foster father take appropriate action. One Sunday, during my foster parents' absence in Manchester, I had begun to cook a few chips, then had left the pan on a low light to look after itself for a while. Suddenly I noticed a small dog walking into the room. At first I took no notice, but when the dog arrived for the third time, I followed it into the kitchen to find the pan blazing and the clothes on the area above the stove beginning to singe. I rushed outside and brought in a shovel full of soil to throw upon it. It was not until then that I realised that the small black dog was Judy, who, although she had belonged to an aunt of mine, loved me more than anyone else. Without Judy's help, I would have definitely lost my life because there was no possible way out of that side room. I was fortunate enough to meet Wing Commander Guy Gibson when I was serving in the ATS during the last war. Baker Street was my location at that time. I'll just show you a little photo they tucked in the corner here. Can you see it? It's all blurry, isn't it? I've got a very good camera today. Some days it's worse than others. No. Come on, focus. No, forget about it. Anyway, that was Julie Wolfe Harlow with singer David Whitfield outside the Winter Gardens Theatre in Blackpool circa 1958. Right. Baker Street was my location at that time. Here's another photo of her. As a trainee air hostess at Squires Gate Airport in 1955. Julia was then 55 years of age. Ah, there we have her. Very pretty woman, isn't she? Very attractive. Well, maybe we'll get a better view of this if I hold it still, like I did with that one. Let's just see what it does. Almost. No, still doesn't want to give us that image. Isn't that odd? Very odd. Very odd. I accompanied a young lady to a nearby club because her friend had failed to arrive at the given time. Arriving at the club, I immediately noticed a very handsome young man sitting alone at the table. Approaching the table, I asked him if I might sit there because the other tables were all occupied. Recognizing him, I felt very concerned when I saw a very painful carbuncle on one side of his face. Ouch, that would hurt. During our conversation, I learned that he was unhappily married and that he desperately missed his black Labrador, unfortunately hit by a vehicle during the night of the Dams raid. He said that he had been grounded but would give anything to go out on one last raid. I felt as though I had suffered a personal loss when he failed to return from his final raid, but I have a little more to add. Many years later, I was watching a program on television concerning Holland. I suddenly noticed a man walking casually by who, on seeing the camera, turned very hastily and shot away. To this day, I believe that I had seen Guy Gibson, unless he has a twin somewhere, and I do not believe this is so. It seems that, after his Mosquito crashed, it became engulfed in flames. Even so, I am convinced that he is still alive. We do know that after the Dams raid, for which he got the Victoria Cross, Wing Commander Guy Gibson was withdrawn from frontline operations, but he always wanted to return, and he volunteered to act as master bomber in a Mosquito of No. 627 Squadron based at RAF Woodhall Spa in Lincolnshire on a raid against Reit, Germany on 19th-20th of September 1944. So by that they mean during that night. Sadly, he came down in flames on his return journey, and his aircraft crashed in Holland, killing both himself and his navigator. Or was he killed? The grave is untended and overgrown, and no one has shown any interest in the grave or those buried there. Julia paused and then continued. This next story also happened during the war. The year was 1940, and I was sleeping in my foster parents' room. I suddenly noticed a pure white light on the opposite wall. Believing it to be a reflection of the searchlights, I took little notice of it. When it began moving around until it was directly upon the wall beside my bed, I became very nervous and rushed down the stairs to tell my foster parents about it. The result of this was that I was told to move back into my own room, which proves that they knew their room was haunted. Since we left the house, it has had one owner after another, so I imagine that the ghost is still fairly active. When living in Caton, I had a pen friend. He was a young soldier serving in Nairobi. And one day he wrote to tell me that his best friend had been shot when patrolling beside him, but that he would never have the same thing happen to him because he was too bright. Then I had no letter for a month, and I wondered what could have happened to him. 2 weeks later, I was looking through the window when I saw, walking slowly towards the croft, a young soldier dressed in the uniform he had been wearing in a snapshot he had sent to me, and with his checkered cap set proudly upon his head. I knew who it was straight away because he had been very handsome. A little girl who lived down a nearby road suddenly appeared and ran straight through him. As I watched him walking slowly along, he disappeared. During my time as a trainee air hostess at Squires Gate Airport, now called Blackpool Airport, I met a very nice Czechoslovakian pilot named Captain Franks. He once made a premonition that he would be the only pilot who did not crash when on duty, because he was the only one who did not drink. After that, it was only a matter of time before every other pilot had gone, taking his unfortunate passengers with him. One day, business was very slack, and I was approached by a pilot who said that he was German. I later discovered that he was Polish. He asked me to accompany him on a flight in one of the Dakotas. I took the co-pilot's seat, and then the tremendous sound of the engine shattered the air. When we were over the sea, he feathered one of the propellers. "We are going down into the drink," he told me. I nearly shot right out of that aircraft. I was not expecting anything like that. Then we approached Blackpool Tower, and he said that he was dive-bombing it. We surged down towards it and then sped upwards again. He might have been accustomed to such aerial tricks, but I hadn't been flying for very long, and it made me feel quite terrified. I'd be very annoyed by someone doing that. When we landed, we were met by the commander of the airfield. He told the pilot that he would be suspended, which made the man swagger out to the airfield altogether. Russell Wyham suggested that I give up my future career as an air hostess, and remembering the very unfortunate events that were to follow, I certainly saved my life by doing that. I've previously mentioned that I have seen animals and birds that have left this world. And my next memory concerns a beautiful ginger cat we once had during the war, but who eventually had to be taken to a vet because she became almost too tired to eat, having lived for an exceptional number of years. Many years later, I visited a friend of mine, Gwen Vaughan. When Gwen came to the door of her flat, she asked me where I had found such a gorgeous cat. I thought that perhaps a cat had followed me, but when I looked down, I could see nothing there. I will just say that Gwen was a clairvoyant. Asking Gwen to describe the cat to me, I heard that it was ginger, black, had a very snowy white chest, and 3 white paws and 1 black paw. I knew then that Gwen had seen our greatly loved cat Ginger, and probably thought that it was a living cat. This proved to me that Gwen was absolutely genuine, because she had never known that we had owned such a pet. How lovely that her cat was still with her. That makes me happy. Julia maintains that, although she had psychic experiences as a child, it was only after her illness did she enter the world of the supernatural, armed with a statuette of the Emperor Lucifer, which she had made and had it fired by the artist Barry Gregson in his kiln. Julia had been told by a specialist that she was dying and he could do no more for her. That gave me a tremendous shock, she said, but I managed to resign myself to it after returning home. The first thing I did was to remove all religious statues from the small altar I kept in my bedroom. That night, I awoke to hear the clock in the sitting room chiming midnight. When I looked towards the window, I saw a figure, completely dressed in black, was climbing through it and into my room. Even though I saw a pair of horns upon his head, I was not afraid. He approached my bed and spoke to me telepathically. If you believe in me, I will save your life. Then raising his hands to his face, he said, in this image, and I knew what he meant. Soon after this, Julia learned the name of a brilliant surgeon who, following a consultation, diagnosed a brain tumour and gave her an operation that cured her. As a direct result of this, I have happiness, a wonderful husband, and eternal youth, said Julia. I have often been mistaken for a young lady in my 30s, even though I was born in 1900. Has Julia Wolfe Harlow the key to unlock and enter the time zone? Here's a little photo, probably won't show up very clearly. She's got a fluffy white hat on, a woolen hat. Little Julia beside a swing in the grounds of 530 Eccles New Road, Salford, Lancashire, where she grew up. Oh yes, you can just almost make out her dear little face there. Well, there you go. That was an interesting twist, people of Earth. Yes. We're up to chapter 3, but I'm tired now. I'm tired now, people of Earth. So I will continue reading probably tomorrow. The time is now 8:44 p.m. on the 21st of April 2025, Easter Monday. And, it was the last day of Passover, so I've got pain under my jaw, which is not good. So worry when it happens. And I'm going to rest now, continue watching You, which is a bit bloody chilling. And the news is all just flashed up in front of my eyes, like my life review in front of my eyes, unbidden by me. This laptop's so weird. But anyway, on that note, I bid you good evening. There's a terrific thunderstorm blowing through, which is quite delightful. Always love a good storm. I loves a good owling, I does. I think it's the quote, I loves a good hanging, I does, but I loves a good howling as well. And anyway, on that note, good evening and good night. Stay happy, stay free, stay wild, and stay away from the politicians and their handmaidens. Just saying, vote however you want to vote. I don't tell anyone how to vote, but it's a very odd thing to happen this afternoon. Anyway, bye for now, people.